Hi, everybody. Welcome to the video chat series that we're doing. I am joined by Stu Opperman. Say hi, Stu.
Hi, Stu.
Stu Opperman is a public relations specialist with Impact Players. And Stu and I have actually been friends for many years. And he specifically has a number of clients that were hit in very different ways by the coronavirus and COVID-19. So we'll start with talking about Memorial Healthcare, who is one of your clients. Let's talk about Memorial Healthcare and how COVID-19 has impacted from a media perspective what they're doing and how you're relaying information to the public and so on and so forth.
Well, the main thing now is, from their perspective, is to release accurate information that can help the public. They're involved with testing sites and helping the public get access to learn whether they are infected with the COVID virus or not. So we're pushing out information and reaching out to media and using social and all of their channels to alert the community, because it is a public healthcare system. We're alerting the community about resources that are available and links that can be trusted and areas for information. But what ultimately happens in a situation like this, when you have a crisis, whether it be a pandemic or hurricanes or anything of the like that people feel threatened by, you get into a lot of damage control and rumors and what's true and what isn't, and so reported this, and a nurse said that some patient was not doing well here, and you get into a lot of the internal and external communications with your audiences to try to make sure that they are fully informed of what they need to know, and also, again, you try to get into a little bit of a mental health aspect of trying to keep people from panicking and doing things that aren't either in their best health or in the best health of the community.
What are some of the examples of people not doing things that are not in the best health, best situation for the community?
Well, I mean, the current one that we're focusing on, Memorial Healthcare System has established a partnership with the state of Florida through the governor's office and the National Guard, who has been deployed to come and set up testing sites. And there's a testing site at C.B. Smith Park in Southwest Broward County that Memorial is administering and providing nurses and doctors and specialists to help with the testing. And so what this is a drive-through site. You'll get swabbed and they'll send your test off to the lab to be analyzed. But an example of a panic situation that we're seeing already is people lining up at all hours of the day or night outside the park to get in. They may not be symptomatic, they may not meet the criteria for the testing that's being done, but because they're panicking and because they sneezed this morning, or because they've got a flu-like symptom, they've taken that to mean I need to get tested for this virus, whether they meet any of the other criteria or not. And so you can just have flu or you can have pneumonia, and it has really nothing to do with COVID-19. And so to put people in situations where they're coming to a testing site where they're not going to be, they're not going to meet the criteria, and in the meantime, they may be potentially exposed to something, or more likely just have to wait in their car for many hours, taking up space and time of the National Guard and nurses and doctors to deal with their case when they're just going to be judged to be not meeting the criteria. So it's very specific. We've tried to be very specific about what testing criteria is. Immunocompromised, over 65 years old, if you've traveled internationally to some of the areas that have been known to have outbreaks, if you've been exposed to someone who has already tested positive, those are some of the things that will qualify to be tested in this situation. But again, people will just show up out of sheer panic thinking, well, I'll talk my way into the test, even though I'm not showing symptoms. I'll tell them that I was overseas recently, or I'll say that I was symptomatic a couple of days ago and it's getting a little better, but I still feel it. There's all sorts of things people will do, again, in a panic situation they might not ordinarily do, that interferes with the real work that's being done on those who are really in crisis.
Right. And that ultimately causes delays in the situation, which is even worse. I mean, kind of great information. Question, you've been doing public relations, crisis management for a while now. have you ever seen anything like this in your career?
Not like this, because even though there have been large crises I've dealt with, situations like hurricanes and Category 5 situations, those are not worldwide. They're a crisis in your area, they're a crisis for your community or state of Florida, let's say, but it's not that you're dealing with people in Italy and China and Vietnam who are running through the same situations. So I think this is a new one for all of us, and we're just at the front of it, unfortunately. And there's a lot we don't know in terms about how the virus is passed along and how it runs its course. And there is no current approved treatment through the CDC or the World Health Organization. So it's not just like, okay, come get your shot and you'll be okay. And so this is the first one that not only is it a health crisis, obviously, but it also affects, all of us as individuals, as business people, as students, as children. I mean, all of people are impacted when there's orders to quarantine or self-isolate or any of that other stuff.
No, it's really, I mean, it's unprecedented, at least, for what I can tell. And it's hard to really fathom. And a lot of people, there is a lot of misinformation out there, and obviously you're trying to spread the right information. And how much more difficult does social media, or how beneficial is social media making your job as far as passing out that information?
Social media is the same in a crisis situation or in a regular time. And by that I mean it's the best and the worst case scenario. It's terrific because you can reach a number of people very quickly. Your opt-in audiences specifically are easy to reach, and it's easy to pass on. And all those things we know about social media that make it a wonderful tool are great. The downside, of course, is when there's incorrect information, or again, this isn't just about this particular time period, it's all the time. If there's information that is inflammatory, let's say, or just downright incorrect, and then it gets passed along and people believe the source of it and they don't do any further checking. And so you have some of those issues that crop up that come from social that wouldn't have been the case 10 or 15 years ago, when people got nearly all of their news from the very traditional sources of television or newspapers.
Right. In your estimation, what is the percentage of good information that's available through social versus bad information and incorrect or false information through social?
I think the rule of thumb is always to go to the organizations that are on top of this, whether it's the CDC in this case or the World Health Organization, or in our state, the Florida Department of Health is a key resource. Memorial Healthcare System has their own internal resources, plus they also will post links to those other sites. Those are the best case scenarios, and those are trusted areas of information from people who are experts. The negative stuff comes from, kind of rogue websites and individuals, who say my cousin's friend is a doctor at the hospital, and, the cancer patients are mixing with the coronavirus patients, and that's what we're hearing. And, that kind of stuff, you have to look at it with a skewed eye and say, well, is that really true, or is that some people talking? And, it's an interesting part of the human condition that people want to spread rumors and gossip, and not because they're, they've got an agenda or they're insidious or anything like that, but we all like to feel like we have some sort of information that others don't have. And so if you call me and you know that I work with a healthcare system and I happen to say, hey, I talked to a nurse this morning who mentioned this, all of a sudden that's a juicy tip from a, mildly informed source. And people want to run with that kind of stuff. And that's where we get into trouble because, obviously it's not vetted. It may not come from a reputable source. It may just be conversation. Maybe it got passed along in the wrong way, which we all know can happen from that childhood game where we whisper something in somebody else's ear and pass it along and it comes out the other side as something different. So in this case, I would recommend that people stick with the traditional sources and in this country, the Center for Disease Control, CDC, is the, the gold standard. And so their website, see what they're recommending, see what they're saying. Again, in your local community, you can go to your, local healthcare system that if you believe that they're, playing a major part in this, and you can get information from them. But, stay away from, websites that you've never heard of, or, the things where maybe they have an agenda. Again, everything in our system sometimes seems so political, and this situation also is that way, even though it shouldn't be. We should all be concerned about, the pandemic and our own health and the health of our neighbors. But like everything else, it becomes a political situation. So if you're on a website that seems to have some obvious agenda, either for or against the current administration, then you should probably take that with a grain of salt as well.
Right. And I think it kind of goes back to the idea of just the sniff test and looking at things through the eyes of a critical thinker, to be able to kind of figure out what information is real, what isn't real. And certainly the source is one of the best ways of kind of passing that sniff test. If it sounds horrific and far-fetched, but it's coming from the New York Times, sometimes you gotta go in line. I'm gonna go with this because it's from the New York Times. Whereas if something is confirmational bias, but it's coming from a poor source, then it could just be confirmational bias.
Well, I agree with you, but the other side of that coin is, without getting too much into politics, we've got a situation now where people will tell you the New York Times can't be trusted because we're told that's fake media. And so if you're one of those people who believe the media has some agenda, then you may not take that as seriously as you might otherwise. And that's part of the issue we have with, again, it's all tied in with traditional media and social and how we receive information, but we have a lot of people out there who have made determinations on what's credible and what's not. And usually if it agrees with what you want to believe, you think it's credible. And, sometimes you could do a Google search for 15 seconds and find out it's not. And people need to really be aware and again, just not spread rumors and not just pass things on that come across your timeline because, it agrees with what you say or it seems interesting or salacious, whatever. Be your own editor is what I'm saying, and be a little more discerning about what you pass along, and do you know it to be true for, as an actual fact, or are you just assuming it is, or is it something you'd like to be true? I mean, these are all tells of, what you should be doing or not. You're bringing your own biases and your agenda to it.
Great stuff. I want to pivot for a moment. From Memorial, you have two other clients that are really impacted in a very meaningful way by COVID-19. And I want to talk first about something that a little bit more near and dear to my heart, which is philanthropy and charities. One of your clients is the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And how has this impacted them on just a short-term, medium-term sort of planning and medium term?
Well, it impacted them in a lot of ways. I mean, the most obvious and understandable is that their staff and their people who are always, in one location, brainstorming and collaborating and making things happen, are all trying to work remotely now. And while working remotely and from home, has this beautiful reputation of like, hey, you don't have to dress up for work and, you can come and go as you please. It's actually very difficult in real life to do, especially if you're not used to doing it and you're used to being in a collaborative environment. And, you've got, in the Make-A-Wish example, and I represent the Southern Florida chapter. So that's 22 counties in South Florida, both East and West Coasts, plus the Florida Keys, and they also have the Virgin Islands in their territory, just so folks know the reference. But the Southern Florida chapter has 40 or 50 people most every day that are used to working together that are no longer doing that. So they're making do, as everyone else is, via video and Skype and phone calls and teleconferences and everything else. But from a bigger picture perspective, their situation is that they're a organization that grants life-changing wishes to critically ill children. And most often those wishes involve travel. because when you ask a child, what do you want to do in this world, or what do you want to see or have or be, a lot of times I want to go to wherever, wherever their dream location might be. So all travel wishes are obviously off,
Right.
Because it's not safe. And these children, many of them are immunocompromised already, and dealing with a number of health issues. So it wouldn't be safe to have these wishes. And another large part of the wish granting experience is to go to big events and big places. Disney World, after 30-something years, is still the #1 destination. They're closed. Kids want to go to Super Bowls and World Series and NBA Finals and March Madness, and some of those on the sporting calendar, they're all off the table. So while they are still trying to grant the wishes that they can, that don't involve public places and large people and travel, the reality of it is most of their wishes do involve those things. And so they are trying to carry on with their mission and with their work as best as they can, knowing that the product that they put out there to the world every day has been taken away from them. So that then you talk about the domino effect of that. And if kids aren't getting wishes and they aren't happening and the publicity around them doesn't make people aware of it, and the events that are helping to fundraise to make these things happen, they're not happening, that's a direct hit on their annual budget. And some nonprofits are better positioned to withstand a dry spell than others. And thankfully, Make-A-Wish in this particular case is in a pretty good place. But I say that saying that if this goes on for many, many months and into the foreseeable future, there's no one that's going to be safe and
of course not,
or without being compromised. And so all of a sudden, you have these commitments that they have, and business does, with expenses that you have and things that you expect and commitments you've made, and there's none of that. And you compound that in philanthropy circles, because if you don't have money to pay the rent or your mortgage or put food on the table, you're certainly not going to be giving it to anyone else. And so that is one of the first places that people who ordinarily might give would not be. And so a nonprofit, any nonprofit that lives on philanthropic dollars, is going to be impacted by this crisis.
Sure. I mean, and as the stock market goes, so does the business go, and when that takes the hit, and
yeah, that's a great point.
And
because while we would like to think that philanthropy is population wide, the reality is it's mostly driven by the wealthy. And when the stock market is taking a hit as it has, and all financial institutions are in jeopardy in some sort, then the wealthy are going to pull back like anyone else would. And that's the reality of the situation. The wealthy give the large share of the dollars to any philanthropy. It's not the $20 or the $25 they collect at a time. It's the major gifts and the endowments and things like that that make the organization run. And if they have an event that raises $400,000 in one night, then that's a large part of the budget. It's not the dribs and drabs from the common folks who might spend what they can. And that's certainly worthwhile that they send it. I'm not minimizing that, but especially in the case of the stock market, that has had a huge effect and will in the future. Even after this passes, there will still be a lot of people saying, hey, I'm a long way from getting back to where I was before I can do what I did at the level I used to.
Sure. And even taking it a step in between, you've got the hyper wealthy who the stock market is impacting, but I think the small business owner who was ordinarily philanthropic in nature, who gave a significant amount of dollars, maybe not quite as much as the hyper wealthy, but gave more than the $25 and $50 in drips and drabs, they're being impacted directly because their bottom line, I mean, they're trying to keep the doors open. And so it kind of goes back to a statement you had said earlier, is if you can't pay your bills, you're not giving it to charity, even if you may want to, but it is the reality of what the fiscal situation that a person happens to be in or a business happens to be in. So,
and that small business owner is going to be worried about his own employees, whether there's 1, 2, 6, 20, whatever they are. If there is extra dollars to go around to help someone stay afloat during this time, they're going to be looking at their own people first before they're looking at, a philanthropic cause. They may believe in, but it's not as connected to them at that moment as their own survival and that of their employees.
Sure, and kind of the old axiom, charity begins at home. If you can't, like kind of going back to like a little more philosophically, if you kind of go back to Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, if your needs aren't being met, you can't become self-actualized. So if charitable giving is a part of your self-actualization and you can't get to the other levels, then you can't get to that top of that pyramid. So sorry, I got a little psychology 101 on that one, but
yeah, no, I remember 11th grade humanities.
see, I did that in college, I guess. So I was a little bit slower than you, I guess. So we talked about the stock markets and the impact that it has. Another client of yours is Tap Financial Partners, which provides sort of back office solutions for hedge funds and others financial services. What are they seeing, and what are the fears, and what are the growth patterns that they're taking with what they're doing?
Well, I mean, in their example and in any other that are in that business, again, much of this is driven by the wealthy, and hedge funds do their fundraising and their capital raises through affluent individuals and family offices and through other funds. And so obviously if all those funds are interconnected with the world financial markets and things are, again, this is not just a US problem where you could say, hey, our stock market's in the toilet, but things are looking pretty good overseas. That's not the case anymore. I mean, this is a worldwide situation. And so again, everybody doesn't know, we all don't know how long this pain is going to be felt for. Presumably a lot longer than we expect, if you take in all the ramifications of it. But we can't say, hey, in a month it's going to be better, or in 2 months you'll be out in your house and going to concerts and sporting events and everything. We just don't know. And the financial services situation is the same way. Everybody's conservative. Everybody's wanting to hold on to their money. Everybody is taking a back seat saying, we just need to wait because we just don't know what the impact is going to be for our business. And again, in the case of some of the hedge funds and things that we're referring to now, the numbers may be bigger than they are in your and I actual existence, but it's the same concept. Right. People are scared, people are unsure where to go, people are unsure what they're going to need moving forward, what they're going to be left with when this whole thing ends or passes or whatever term we're using. And so they're all very conservative about what they do and where they spend and how they raise money. And again, some of this is done just, me to you. If you're someone who might live in Ireland or whatever, and I'm capital raising, I might pay a visit to you to see, if you want to invest and show you the prospectus and talk about what we expect and the returns you can get. Well, that's not happening, not only because you don't want to really part with your money, I can't even travel to Ireland. So, a lot of what happens face to face is off the table right now as well.
So one thing that you'd mentioned to me prior to our conversation, our interview here, is they're though doubling down. They're taking an aggressive stance from a marketing and PR perspective. Is that correct?
Not in a PR perspective. I mean, in terms of, I also do, in addition to the crisis communications and traditional public relations, I do a lot of content production. And so in that respect, they're being aggressive about trying to prepare for coming out the other side, what that's going to mean, what they need to have in place, what services that they could offer that they hadn't been doing previously, but might be more in demand in the future. So they're trying to take a long-term look at the whole situation and prepare for that. So in that respect, I'm busy with what I'm doing for them, but not in the respect of, hey, let's put out messages to the media and, and try to get placements and put our spin on things, because in that case, they're not doing that.
No, well, it would make sense to do that now. I would assume, one, that's not newsworthy today. The whole point of press and what you do from a PR and media relations perspective is to get press. And right now, they're not doing something that's specific to Corona and COVID, I would assume that it would.
There's no audience for it.
Right.
And we talked about this a little this morning. It's not only is your information going to fall on deaf ears because it'll be disregarded because, no one cares about, a local plumber or something or restaurant in these times. But you also could be judged negatively. Again, if you're a local business talking to a local media outlet and there's only like one reporter who's on the beat that you're involved in, and you pitch that reporter something, off topic, or again, I used the word tone deaf earlier this morning, just folks who aren't aware of the situation and how many people are impacted. People remember things, people hold grudges, and people, and I'm not saying the media has an agenda, but I'm saying it's just human nature to look at something like that. Like I did this morning, I got an email from a very high-end real estate company. And they were marketing some property apparently that had come on, in their listings very recently. And the words were, it's the ultimate getaway for someone who has everything. Again, this is a $1 zillion property they're trying to market. And I guess in normal times, that might be okay. If, I don't know how I got on their email list, but
I definitely need to hang out with you more. That's all
might receive that and click on something and take a look around and be a potential customer. But in this case, I was thinking to myself, how is it this company doesn't have enough awareness of who they are and what they're saying that they wouldn't pull down this email before it went out? I'm even giving the benefit of the doubt. It was scheduled well in advance, and this is just how they do business. But again, you still have to be aware enough of what's going on today to say, hey, listen, that's not an email we're prepared to send right now. And the same thing with small businesses who want to pitch their stories to the media. If you have a COVID angle to it and it makes some sense and it could help people that are scared or in crisis or without services or whatever, then by all means, that may have an audience and they may very well appreciate it. But if it's just your regular business that you're pitching and you're trying to sell me a high-end property, somewhere in Fort Lauderdale, that's probably not the message you want out there right now. And again, you don't want to be looked at as someone trying to profit, on negative times.
right. So to that point, what advice would you give to people trying to continue business, trying to keep things some measure of normalcy, that don't want to be tone deaf? They want to be cognizant of what's happening to the world, but also want to feel normal and to do business and transact normally. To what would you advise to those people?
Well, I think in general, you should pull back from your traditional media outreach if you've been doing that. Again, their staffs and their resources are 100% on coronavirus right now, as they should be. And so you're not going to have an audience in the traditional sense. But what you can do is speak to your audiences that you have elsewhere, whether that's your website or whether that's your social media sites or any other media forums that you have access to that you control in some way. You can reassure your customers. You can tell them your new hours of operation. You can tell them about new things you're doing in response to things they may be feeling or experiencing. And then if you're just in that situation, if you own a like say a restaurant, let's say, and if you have takeout food or something that people can pick up and drive through, that's great. But if your message is, come have your next party for 200 people at our location, then that's not something that's going to fly right now. And so you need to be cognizant of that and not put that message out there. Even though that's what you do, you're a caterer and you have space and you need to fill that space with lots of bodies who are eating and drinking. I get it, but it's just that's not where we are right now. And so you have to move your message to something else. And again, if it's your own internal audiences, people who have opted into be a part of your world, then you have that opportunity to communicate with them without looking like you're looking to profit on it, because presumably you've been communicating with them about things all along.
So I would say to the example you described, that catering company, is I would simply advise to pivot to offering pickup or even delivery type of services for people that are scared and need to feed and so on and so forth. So it allows you to be providing a service at a time that people are a little bit nervous, or even offering not even prepared food, but by offering, sundries when people can't get the pasta or they can't get the bread or whatever it is, you have a stock of that by offering that as a courtesy for ultimately whatever your cost was, plus a few pennies or something like that. It gives you an opportunity to present that, and that almost becomes a media-worthy event to share, saying, hey, letting the world know we have this bread. It's gonna go bad. We can't have events. Come get it, and it's $2 a loaf or whatever it is. So it's the same cost as this, and we'll just drive by. You give us the money, and we'll just throw it into your car, so you don't have to get out of the car for it. So sort of drive up to kind of keep you safe. It allows you to create a media-worthy event. I would think, you're the expert on this, but for a situation where you're otherwise not able to do it. So it's a socially appropriate way of creating business in a pivoted sort of way at a time when otherwise, you're otherwise shut down. I mean, would you agree? Or
yeah, I would agree. And what I see other people doing also along those lines, and this is not necessarily just selling to the public, but, and I'm not saying they should do this if it's not in their heart to do it, but if you are a community-minded business in general, and you want to prepare meals, if you're a restaurant, let's say, for first responders and healthcare professionals and police and people who are working many, many hours at risk and exposure to themselves, if you want to provide some short-term comfort to them through food, that may be something that you can do. It's not a profit center for your business, but it is good karma and goodwill, and you can talk about it on your social channels or on your website, what we're doing in the community and how we're trying to do our little part. And potentially, again, when things get back to normal, if there's a decision to be made between two similar restaurants, and I know that one of them, has done a lot for the community and fed policemen and healthcare professionals and things like that, well, that might be the tipping point where I'd say, I'm going to go there instead of the other guy. There's always that corporate social responsibility, and the research within that says people are inclined to do business with businesses that they feel are good corporate citizens if all other things are equal.
Well, CSR has become obviously a major conversation point for corporations, for the last 5 years or so, give or take, maybe even a little bit longer. And I think to that point, kind of going back to what you mentioned about the food, I immediately thought of Jose Andres, who has done a lot of that sort of work where he would go overseas and feed the poor. He's, world-class celebrated chef, James Beard and all those other sorts of things. But the first thing I can think of when I hear his name is all the work that he's done. And the fact that I've been to a few of his restaurants, I would want to go anyway, but it makes me that much want to do it even more. So I think it's a great thing to do. So providing, I guess I would say, is providing value is probably the thread that's sort of connecting all these conversations. Is how are you providing value at a time when people are desperate for that value?
Absolutely.
People have the time, and they have, they whether they like it or not, they have the time. And so creating value in secondary ways. I mean, for me, doing this interview and sharing that among our channels is providing value. It's not, you and I aren't going to make any money from this. I mean, this is just taking up part out of our day, but I think it's providing things that people aren't necessarily aware of that hopefully they'll find interesting, and make them a more informed person today and in the future.
I mean, I think we're all trying to figure it out as we go along. There is no playbook for something like this. And so, whatever you feel that you can do, whoever you are, to contribute in some way to, the health and wealth of your community or your neighbors or your organization or whatever, even in a minor way. And, it could be as minor as, hey, before I pass that along on Facebook that says we're all going to die, in the next 20 days, maybe I should look into that before I pass it along. Even something as small as that is a tiny drop in the bucket of what you can do as an individual to try to get through this. And that's really, I think, the end game here. We're all just trying to get through and come out the other side and resume whatever normal lifestyles we have and carry on, when this is not at our doorstep as it is today.
Right. Stu, thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to do it.
This has been outstanding. You want to give 30 seconds about Impact Players and a little plug for yourself?
Well, Impact Players is a public relations firm. Excuse me. We're based in South Florida. And as you've heard throughout the last time we've been online here, we do crisis communications, traditional public relations in the aspect of media and those kind of internal, external communications, also content production. Been in South Florida for quite a number of years. This is our backyard. While we do work regionally and nationally from time to time, most of our clients are based here in this community. So again, we just want to do our part and help in whatever ways we can. If this interview is seen as valuable by others, that's terrific. And but we're here and we're hoping to do good things and make stuff happen for our clients and our media contacts and all of our other partners along the way.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody, hope you found this valuable. I'll put Stu's contact information in the information below. And I would say that, Stu, when you share this through your channels, you can put my contact information. Flying Chimp is a marketing firm. We specialize in telling the story, finding that message that makes you unique and special, and then getting people to hear that story. And we do that, whether it's websites, search engine optimization, social media, branding, graphic design, that kind of stuff. That's marketing related. We probably do it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
All right.